Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Go by Boat, Stories of a Maine Island Doctor, by Dr. Chuck Radis, narrated by Cole Tamminen. Chapter 1. Not every doctor works for every patient. Ron Anderson, M.D. Lancet. Bud Perry reached up with the tip of his index finger and felt the swollen edge of the infection beneath his left eye. Take a blade, slice it open. It's not ready. The infection hasn't come to a head. There's nothing to drain, I answered. Lancet, you know it needs to be lanced. I sucked in my cheeks. It's not ready. You have a fever. This is a serious infection. We need to get it under control with intravenous antibiotics in the hospital. Forget about the hospital. Give me some pills and I'll come back tomorrow. I probably nicked the edge of it trimming my beard. I raised an eyebrow. Mr. Perry's unkempt, gray, tobacco-stained beard billowed out from his chest and flowed across his face like a virgin forest. Through the partially opened door, I caught the eye of Catherine, seated at the front desk. Petite, with olive skin and dark, wavy hair, Catherine comprises 100% of the support staff for the Peaks Island Health Center. She schedules and rooms our patients, records their blood pressure and weight, draws their blood, calls in prescriptions, and has seen Bud Perry bully his way through 3 previous doctors at the health center. Several months into my island practice, I am mortally close to being the 4th. Don't you think it's time you switch to an electric razor? I suggested, buying time. If it reaches your bloodstream, an infection like this can attach to your artificial heart valve. No reaction. At least let me draw some blood cultures. Mr. Perry grunted and offered up an arm as I applied a tourniquet. While a second red-top tube filled, my gaze shifted to an ear sticking out beneath his captain's cap. Leaning inward for a closer look, I examined the top of the ear. The lesion was definitely cancerous, either a squamous cell or basal cell carcinoma. I've had that gizmo, whatever it is, on my ear for years. Never mind about that. Just give me something for this damn infection on my cheek. Mr. Perry, I took a deep breath. You're already blind in one eye. Let's make sure we do everything we can to protect the other eye. We can have you in town in no time. Start IV antibiotics and have you home. Abruptly, Bud Perry leaned on the handle of his makeshift cane, a cut-off coal shovel, and, pushing himself to his feet, started for the door. Fine. Maybe Tommy Elkhorn has some pills left over from his prostate infection. Catherine knocked on the door. Can you take a phone call? Cliff Island. They need a house call. In a second. Hold on, Mr. Perry. I exhaled in defeat. From the cabinet, I counted out 16 cephalexin and sealed them in an envelope. I am making a deal. It is the best I can get for now. For all I know, Tommy Elkhorn's pills were prescribed to deworm his cat. Take 2 pills 4 times a day with food. Alcohol is not food. The rest of your prescription should be down on the afternoon ferry. I want to see you tomorrow, bright and early. If the blood cultures grow out bacteria, I'm admitting you. I pulled my pocket calendar from my shirt pocket and wrote, Call Bud Perry, 766-3439. If alive tomorrow and skips appointment. Emptying the envelope in his palm, Bud looked at the pills skeptically. Suddenly, he was in no particular hurry to leave. He held a pill up to the light and squinted through his sighted eye like an indecisive cyclops. You're not giving me sulfa, are you? No, Mr. Perry, I'm not giving you sulfa. I involuntarily ground my teeth. Hold on. The man needs help. Try to understand where he's coming from. I placed my hand on his shoulder. I've checked your chart, and you took the same antibiotic last year, and you know I'm allergic to sulfa. he interrupted. "Laid me out good as dead. But I'll take these pills. What do I know, anyway? They're probably better than Tommy's pills." Then he jabbed the end of the coal shovel toward my midsection. "Doc, you need to put some weight on those bones. I'm serious, you look like crap. And nobody calls me Mr. Perry. It's Bud." I looked helplessly to Catherine, who could only wave limply as she tried to smother her laughter. Bud hobbled out to the front desk to pay his bill. I followed behind, scribbling a note, and reached for the phone behind the partition, separating me from the checkout counter by all of 6 feet. "Hello, this is Dr. Radis." "Doctor, this is Gerald Tingley on Cliff Island. Mother's been having some trouble. Wondered if you could come down the bay and look her over." "Trouble?" I asked, uneasily, before committing myself more fully. "Breathing trouble." Then, after a long pause, "Can't seem to catch her breath." I closed my eyes, focusing, running my fingers through a shock of thinning light brown hair. Self-consciously, I felt the edge of my belt buckle and realized I was on the last notch. My pants draped loosely off my hips. I glanced at the mirror above the sink. I pulled down a lower eyelid, inspecting the conjunctiva for signs of anemia. Maybe I need some vitamins. "Her breathing problem, did it start today?" "Been this way since last week, but got worse last night. The oxygen don't seem to be holding her. She's asking if you can make the trip, come up to Cliff Island, check her out, maybe switch out her pills." Resting a foot on the edge of the metal 3-drawer desk, I leaned back into my chair, listening, sorting out what to say next. Beyond the checkout counter was the waiting room. On the dull orange threadbare carpet, a toddler stacked blocks at the feet of a young mother, as several nuns seated directly across looked on. One nun was humming as she knitted. The other, a good 80 pounds over ideal body weight, grimaced as she shifted a swollen leg on a cushion. That would be Sister Mia. To the right, adjacent to the waiting room, I could see a narrow alcove with a refrigerator and sink. To enter, one passed through the swinging half-doors, saloon fashion. On the counter was an ancient microscope with brass fittings, manufactured by the Bausch & Lomb Optical Company. Next to it was a package of microscope slides and cover slips, a bottle of immersion oil with a dropper, and a rack of smaller bottles required to perform a gram stain, a series of stains enabling me to visualize bacteria, either gram-positive or gram-negative, when I focused the microscope on the highest magnification. Adjacent to the microscope was a centrifuge, a critical piece of equipment. After drawing blood and centrifuging the tubes, they would be refrigerated until I transported them to the hospital laboratory. In the cabinets above the microscope were sterile containers for urine cultures, dipsticks to assess for blood or protein in the urine, throat and wound culture swabs, and a spare glucometer. A syringe pre-filled with 0.3 cubic centimeters of 1 to 1,000 epinephrine was taped inside the cabinet door. If a patient suffered a severe anaphylactic reaction, injecting the epinephrine promptly might be the difference between life and death while the fireboat chugged out to peaks. I liked the surety of the pre-filled syringe. The last thing you want to do when a patient abruptly gasps for breath is track down where the epinephrine and syringe are located. Medications, samples of antibiotics, blood pressure meds, and pain relievers were stored in a shelf adjacent to the hallway. Some patients had family members who could pick up prescriptions in town after work, but if not, it might be 2 or 3 days before a prescription arrived on the island from a pharmacy in Portland, an unacceptable wait. Around the corner from the laboratory were 2 exam rooms. One was a bit larger than the other, my procedure room, where I kept supplies for wound care and suturing and performed gynecologic exams. The other was cozier, with framed photos of animals and island scenes on the walls. This was our pediatric room. All told, the Peaks Island Health Center measured perhaps 35 by 25 feet, making up the bottom story of a cottage donated to the island by a family who had lost a child to suicide. In recent years, insulation has been blown into the walls, the double-hung windows replaced on the ground floor, and a wooden ramp installed to improve access. But from the outside, if one were walking up Sterling Street, you'd never guess the cream-colored cottage was the home of the island's health center. Catherine reached around the divider and flashed me a note. Portland police boat can be at Peaks Island dock 40 minutes. I mouthed the words, "No house call," and shook my head emphatically. An elderly woman short of breath, 6 miles off the coast, needs an emergency room, not a house call. "Mr. Tingley, Gerald be fine." "Gerald, hold on there, Doc. Mother, you've got yourself tangled up, but good. No wonder you're having such a hard time. The tube's crimped under the chair. Lean forward. Let me snake this round your neck. There. Now try to slow down your breathing. Doc, oxygen is on 4. Gerald, listen to me carefully. I'm in the middle of clinic hours here on Peaks. Even if I did come out to Cliff Island later today, I can't properly evaluate your mother, much less treat her without a chest x-ray and blood work. We can arrange a transfer uptown in less than an hour and a half. I can meet her at the hospital later this evening. Doc, I've moved to the kitchen. Got to keep my voice down. We're having quite a time. I'd say quite a time, and the straight up is she's not coming into town. Said so when she got off the ferry last week. Mr. Tingley, help me out here. Why is your mother on oxygen? What's wrong with her lungs? I asked. Lung. Excuse me? Lung. Only got one lung. Lung cancer. Surgery was in Philadelphia last month where she lives, when she's not summering on Cliff. The doctors say she's cured, but they had to take a lung. We thought she'd never get off the respirator. Pneumonia settled in, heart failure, the works. I slouched down further in my swivel chair. Gerald, your mother absolutely has to be transferred to an emergency room. Now, which hospital do I tell the rescue boat she'll be coming to? There was a long pause. Doc, she says she'd rather die here at home than go back to the hospital. He cleared his throat. It's not a pretty sight, hard all the way round, if you take my meaning. My brother and me been up all night with her. Things are running kinda thin. The sound of a woman's voice cut Gerald off, and the phone rattled to the floor. Then silence. Doctor? Mrs. Tingley was on the line, her breathing coming in shallow, raspy gasps. Dr. Radis, thank you for coming. I heard myself telling her I was on my way as soon as the police boat arrived. Hanging up the phone, I grumbled to Catherine there was no room in my bag for an emergency room. I should have stood firm. No house call. You should see Sister Mia before you leave, Catherine said. She has an infection behind her heel. Sister Marie Henry is fine. She's here for support. I've already taken a throat swab on the little boy. It's positive for strep. We have liquid penicillin samples to get him started. I can call Rosemont Pharmacy for the remainder. With luck, it'll be down on the 4:30 ferry. I'll call Sandy for you. She may need to hold your dinner. Do you have the spare oxygen tank and an extra IV set up? If something comes up, I'll reach you on your beeper. 30 minutes later, I straddled my 3-speed Schwinn, the emergency box dangling off one handlebar and my green satchel off the other, strapped the spare oxygen tank onto the bike rack, and set off for the dock. Good morning, Dr. Radis. An adolescent boy jogged past as I turned onto Island Avenue. We have the day off from school, he shouted, briefly running backward. I tried to place him. Carrot mop hair, long legs, short torso. Had I seen him at the health center? I watched him disappear around the corner, compact stride, quick leg turnover. As a former college runner, I knew a budding talent when I saw one. Ricky Hogan. Now I remembered. He'd mown our lawn twice this summer. Sandy'd said he could use the money. Nice kid. He'd played with our 2-year-old Kate after finishing the lawn. Single mom. Dad, what had I heard? Absent. I tested my brakes at Down Front, the local ice creamery, and rattled down the ancient cobblestones of Welch Street to the Peaks Island wharf. The 28-foot Connolly glided into the dock at mid-tide. Exposed mussel flats shushed as the wake of the boat sent a freshet of water further up the beach. With his wraparound aviator glasses, Officer Bob Eldridge gave the heady impression that at any moment he might be called away for a crucial drug bust. In reality, he had the cushiest assignment on the force. Pushing off, he maneuvered the boat past several late-season moorings before throttling up the diesel and slicing through the uneven chop into mid-channel. "Where are we off to?" "Cliff Island. Tingley's. The Tingley Boys Lobster." He seemed to be searching an internal database of island names and associations. A fog bank loomed ahead in the channel between Peaks and Long Island. Officer Bob removed his sunglasses and flipped on the radar screen and casually adjusted the settings. "Old Lady Tingley, I thought she died." Not yet, I thought. Underway, I opened my emergency tackle box, quietly reviewing my medications from A, albuterol inhaler, an asthmatic medication, to Z, Xeroxilin, a potent diuretic that can quickly remove excess fluid. My Sears Bassmaster tackle box included several drugs I've never used outside the hospital setting. These are my what-if drugs, as in, what if I'm an hour from the hospital and a patient's asthma is life-threatening? IV methylprednisolone and subcutaneous epinephrine are the answer. What if an islander becomes psychotic? Haldol. Heart attack? Subcutaneous heparin, aspirin, morphine. Or falls into a diabetic coma? Insulin and IV fluids. From a side pocket, I pulled out my portable glucometer and checked the batteries. Everything seemed to be in working order. House calls are a throwback to the time when medicine was more art than science, more intuition than definitive diagnosis. And not all of my house calls have been resounding successes. On my first house call last summer, I'd forgotten to pack a thermometer, its significance heightened by my inability to simply stop rummaging through my black bag. I should have felt the patient's forehead and declared it felt a little warm, instead of acting like a total imposter. Over time, though, I was developing a routine, a comfort zone. No, this house call would be out of my comfort zone, way out. The fog met us, blanketing the boat in a cool white mist. Officer Bob cut our speed by half and adjusted the gain on the radar. He unbuttoned his collar, his face reflected in the green glow of the radar screen. A wave slapped the bow, and then another, the heavy-set police boat rocking ever so slightly. Flipping the radar on and off, Officer Bob rechecked the chart and tapped the compass with his index finger. We slowed further. It felt wrong. He gave the horn 3 long blasts, a warning to nearby boats, and took off his cap before readjusting it a little lower over his eyes. The wind shifted, and as if touched by a magician's wand, the outline materialized of Pumpkin Knob, an outcropping off the north end of Peaks Island. Moments later, we were in full sunlight, bouncing over shore-driven chop toward Cliff Island, 5 miles distant, the fog bank receding behind us like a great gray wall. Outside the shelter of the inner islands, the wind gusted a good 15 to 20 knots, but the sky was a brilliant blue with an early September chill in the air. We scattered a raft of eiders, the chunkier black and white males, skunk ducks in the local parlance, beating their wings frantically to clear a line of whitecaps. Coming into cliff in the lee of the wind, we maneuvered past the dilapidated Maine pier to the inside of a rectangular float where dinghies were tied like horses at a hitching post. I clambered out on the bow of the police boat with a paddle, pushed aside a dinghy, and jumped onto the float. Officer Eldridge handed me my black bag, the spare oxygen tank, and the house call tackle box. I stared at the iron-rung ladder hanging off the pier, tucked the tank under an arm, and tied the tackle box to my belt before ascending one-handed. Then I retrieved my black bag. No one said it would be easy. Above us, on the main pier, a gaunt, bearded man in a faded blue windbreaker silently watched my progress. As I pushed open the gate at the top of the ladder, he extended a hand. "She's not great, but that extra fluid pill you told me to give Mother seemed to do the trick. That and turning up the oxygen a dite. Gerald Tingley." He leaned out over the gate and shouted down to Officer Eldridge, "Hey, Bobby, you want to come out to the house?" Bob waved him off and opened up the newspaper. I was tight as a bowstring reviewing my what-ifs. Shoot, I realized I'd forgotten the blood draw kit. What if I needed to draw blood? Maybe I had a spare kit wrapped in with my reflex hammer and tuning fork. No, it doesn't matter. No need to draw blood. She's coming to town. Period. We climbed into Gerald's ancient Dodge pickup, the corroded bed covered by 2 sheets of plywood. Rust had claimed the wheel wells and worked its way back towards the tailgate. A twisted piece of oak driftwood served as the bumper. The engine caught and sputtered, stalled. I fumbled instinctively for my seat belt before realizing the truck not only lacked this rudimentary feature but also had no directional signal, emergency brake, radio, inspection sticker, or windshield wipers. Curious about the heater, I asked Gerald if it ran. "Like a pip." He flipped the blower on and my baseball cap flipped off. "Just the basics," he grinned. "Most of the trucks and cars on Cliff couldn't get stickered in town, so they wound up here instead of a junk pile. Elephant's graveyard." Traveling down a narrow dirt road away from the bay, deeper into the red spruce and low bush blueberry, I closed my eyes and tried to relax and enjoy the scenery. Out of the wind, late morning sunshine warmed the cab as we drove by fading patches of chicory and rose hips and tangled clumps of Queen Anne's lace. Above us, a canopy of sugar maple interwoven with stands of spruce and white pine glided by. The muffled sound of surf on a cobblestone beach reached us over the drone of the mufflerless Dodge. Gerald pulled over and cut the engine. "Grab your stuff, Doc." Okay, I thought, this is it. Placing my Littman stethoscope around my neck like a talisman, I patted my cowlick down and gave myself a pep talk. "Here we go. Be sharp." But from the roadside there was no house, only unbroken forest. "The house is down this way out on the point." Gerald pointed to a narrow dirt path leading into the woods. I dutifully followed, lugging my supplies into the cool darkness. The path wound around bare outcroppings of ledge and stands of stunted red spruce, their low-lying branches draping over the trail. "How in the world did your mother get to the house?" I asked. "Walked," Gerald replied. "Isn't there another entrance, a roadway, some type of shortcut?" "Trail don't usually bother her. Reminds her of a fairy tale. I usually clean out the trail once or twice a year." He paused. "To be truthful, I didn't think she'd be back this fall." I heard the surf long before we emerged from the forest. Stopping at the edge of an overgrown meadow, we watched the shoulder-high rollers explode onto exposed bedrock, sending geyser-like plumes of spray skyward. On the point, a weather-beaten, brown-shingled cottage faced the open ocean. A shallow porch with a sagging roof line extended from the waterside. Across the reach, perhaps 3/4 of a mile distant, was Jewel Island. Beyond it, the Gulf of Maine. Reaching the porch, I gripped my black doctor bag tightly and opened the screen door. Inside, Mrs. Tingley, all 90 pounds of her, looked even worse than I'd expected. Slumped in a wooden rocker, her blue eyes focused on an indefinite point beyond the breakers, her breathing came in irregular, shallow, bird-like gasps. Another son, stockier and shorter by a head than Gerald, fidgeted with her oxygen tube and managed to shake his head hopelessly. I laid my hand on Mrs. Tingley's shoulder and told her without much conviction that she was going to be okay. On the sofa behind her, I opened the tackle box, the 3 trays on each side unfolding like a flowering rose, exposing my therapeutic options. The 2 brothers stood off to one side, waiting. I listened briefly to the right lung, or rather the former site of the right lung. Silence. Inching my stethoscope around to the left lung, I auscultated a racing, chaotic heart rhythm amid a background of high-pitched wheezes and crackles. I placed my stethoscope on the chest again and palpated her pulse at the wrist. The rhythm was definitely an irregularity. The diagnosis? Atrial fibrillation with congestive heart failure, or, in a more descriptive bygone era, dropsy. Glancing down at my watch, I counted the heart rate over 15 seconds and then multiplied this by 4, 160 per minute. I wrote this down in my pocket calendar and continued my exam. Her fingertips were a dusky blue, her lower legs massively swollen. When I pressed with my index finger into the soft tissues around the ankles, it left a persistent indentation. Her heart rhythm, atrial fibrillation, was responsible for her rapid decline. As the heart races, fluid backs up and spills out into the lungs and soft tissues. Less oxygen leads to further pump failure and inevitably a slow-motion, drowning death. It's a hard way to go. No wonder the brothers had wanted me to come. It's tough watching a loved one drown. I reached for a vial of digitalis and, as I drew it up, realized we might have passed foxglove, the original plant source, on our walk through the field. Digitalis strengthens the pumping motion of the heart and will slow the irregular racing rhythm of atrial fibrillation, but I'd never before given it outside the hospital setting. Give the proper dose and the heart responds. Infuse too much and it acts as a toxin. In medical parlance, digitalis has a, quote, narrow therapeutic window, end quote. I broke open a vial and slowly injected 1/4 milligram, wrote down the dosage and time, and waited. Mrs. Tingley, I squatted down in front of her rocking chair. Mrs. Tingley? She looked up vacantly as if seeing me for the first time. I'm afraid I need to insist you come into town. The police boat is waiting. She clasped my hand lightly. Thank you for coming. I took that as a yes. We'd make the transfer, but first Mrs. Tingley had to be stabilized. If she decompensated on the trail, well, I pushed that thought aside. Focus. Concentrate on the present. During the next hour and a half, I drew up and injected several additional doses of digitalis, along with furosemide, a potent diuretic. Gerald moved a bedside commode next to the rocker, and the boys lifted her onto it when their mother felt an overwhelming urge to urinate. 3 times she relieved herself, only to nod off, slumping forward when she returned to the rocker. By mid-afternoon, her heart and respiratory rate were halved, the coarse, rattling congestion of her lung replaced by a Buddha-like serenity. Pulling a strand of matted hair behind her ear, she looked at me as if for the first time. Thought you were going to lose me, didn't you? Your lung is clearer now, I answered. Yes, you were close. You can't stay here tonight. It's an awful feeling not getting enough air.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?